If you're traveling across America, you might, in the heat of the late morning, at the edge of a large city or an extensive forest, come across a large hand-painted sign. It will only be there if you ain't in a hurry. You will only notice it if you have no place in particular to be. The sign features one word, and no matter your history with that type of entertainment it advertises, you will be intrigued. If you were lucky, you'll continue on, thinking a sign that old couldn't refer to something that still exists. Unfortunately, it does, but only if you ain't looking for it. You are following a sign marked Zoo.
Episode 5, In All Men's Hearts.
McKayla Kespar, November 12th, 2018, 11:35 a.m. I'm recording this on my lunch. I'm taking some of Beckett's advice. I'm spending more time on regular work, but I'm keeping my eyes open. I've also sent requests to the Kansas City office for all relevant files on 79-KC-7986. I've been pushing through my normal work as fast as I can, and dog-earing anything that gives me the Wiggins. After the Rougarou recording that I heard, I can't. I pulled up the rest of the case to see if it would settle anything for me. The recording agent, Windsor, documented the video he saw. When an FBI SWAT team infiltrated the location the next day, they found nothing. There were no chairs, no tables, no screen, no projector or candles or silver serving trays. Just a handwritten note saying, "Don't try to find us again." This was the closest the FBI ever got to the Mandrake Circle. The Throckmortons were eventually busted under federal narco statutes. It didn't, by the way. It didn't settle anything. All the answers did was create a greater desire to figure out the bigger picture. The sign. Popcorn mentioned it. It was there. It's like throwing stones into a lake. I keep wanting to fill it in, but all it does is make the water rise. I've found two, unsettling cases that don't speak well of the people that encounter the man in the charcoal hat. The first is a series of photocopies from the journal of Martin Townsend. Yes, that Martin Townsend. Evidence from case file 266-LR-0082, the Midwest Mail Bomber, collected February 12, 1990. September 29th, 1989. I made another sacrifice. I drove into town this morning to make another delivery. May angels speed it to its destination. As I left the package on the post office counter, I whispered the words of Father Blake as I did the last time when my delivery was so successful. As I drove back to the Glade, I almost wanted to stay, to wait, to find a way to wait for news on how many of them had fallen. But it would be days, and staying around was a good way to get caught. When I reached the turn, I heard it again. The call, and I knew that I had done God's work. I walked alone up the path to my cabin, and I saw the horns of God. Okay, let's see here. A few more entries, usually one every day, mostly ramblings about rights of the unborn, blah blah blah. Oh, here's where he comes up with the name Martyr of Spilled Blood that he used to taunt the press with for 3 months. Okay, here's something interesting from October 18th. And I saw upon the rock a creature, a great and powerful force of nature. It was the size of a grizzly bear, with a pair of curved, forked antlers, nearly the height of a man in length, that shot up from the head and touched the heavens. This thing, could have killed me in an instant had we not been separated by the river, looked down at me, and it judged me. And this, the messenger of God, deemed me worthy. And then this chancellor of heaven produced the most haunting sound. A cry, a howl, a resonating harmony of God's creation that echoed through the hills and shook my very bones. God has anointed me his hand in this world. Okay, so this guy is deranged, to say the least. But even in this, there is something. November 3rd. I went to town early this morning. 2 weeks was all I could wait. I have not finished the next message, but I needed to know. I needed to know. 2. Only 2. 2 is not enough to send the message of God. And when I returned, I heard not the voice of God, nor did I see it. That night, as I tried to sleep, I kept hearing the distant howl in the woods. It wasn't validating anymore. It was mournful and terrifying. November 10th. I delivered the next message to the post, and the forest was silent. November 23rd. I went to town to mail the next message. I forgot the stupid holiday. The glory of God will be delayed by the stupid fucking government holiday. For all my effort, for all the work, I was met only with repeating failure. The paper I was able to get my hands on, the headline: 3 protesters die in bombing at Women's Health Center. Protesters! Feeble beasts of creation, fumbling blindly for the light of God with hands of good intentions. Wow, this guy was a fuck. I have not helped the cause. I have hindered it. On the way back to the glade, I was informed of the Lord's opinion of my failure. At the turn within the brush that leads up to the cabin, I saw it. Right across from the turn, exposing it in the brush. It was so stark I got out of the truck. I had to touch it to make sure it was real. Hanging from 7-foot poles, a large wooden surface, 4 foot wide and nearly 4 foot tall, covered in violet paint, peeling and stained from age. The deep impressions of a claw mark burned into the bottom right corner. At the top, the eyes of an insect's wings looked down, judging me. And in the middle, the word, the implication, zoo. And in that moment I touched the sign, I heard the howl, long and trumpeting and warbling in the distance. The message was clear. God's judgment is without question or appeal, and I have been found wanting. This quickly devolves into ramblings and trash, corresponding with the degrading quality of the mail bombs. The bomb he would mail the next Monday failed to detonate. The one he mailed in December detonated in the mail truck, killing nobody but destroying more than a few Christmas presents. And then came the cold. December 19th. The sign is back. It was gone for 2 weeks, but it's back. I got a letter back from Father Blake. He doesn't seem to understand. He told me to stop. He told me to surrender, to turn myself in. Turn myself into what? What's the point in seeking earthly judgment when the heavens have made it very clear? It haunts me. The voice of God. It walks the ground in ever-tightening circles. It's changed now, split and cacophonous. Where before it was the angelic harmony of unearthly instruments, now it is the dark and disastrous discourse of a demonic orchestra. I cannot understand. December 20th. It is unbearably cold. The little stove in my cabin cannot keep up. The glass, even in the height of the sunlight, is covered in ice. I can barely feel my fingers. And it's outside. I went to see if the sign was there, and it was. Closer. It was only a few hundred steps from my front porch. And then the beast came sniffing around. It's the dead of night, and I'm writing by the glow from the stove and one candle. It's outside. I can hear its weight trudging through the dead leaves. When it roars, when it screams, I feel something I've not felt in years. Fear. December 23rd. It left. After 3 days, it finally left. It tore apart my outhouse. It threw my wood pile off into the woods, one piece at a time. It broke the windows out of my truck, but it didn't touch the sign. The sign. The sign at the end of my porch. Why? What is its message? Zoo? Am I an animal caged within my own failure? On display for the world to see? Am I already in the zoo? December 24th. On this, Christmas Eve, he came. He came at sunset when the porch was drenched in dying light. He knocked and I grabbed my gun. I knew this was it. They'd found me. I'd done something, left some clue. They'd figured out something. I was sloppy. I had to have been sloppy. I opened the door to see a man, in a brimmed hat and trench coat. The sun was setting behind him, and I could not see his face in the light, just make out the silhouette of wild hair under the hat and the horn-rimmed sunglasses. Good evening. I'm here looking for... Well, we seem to have misplaced an animal. Have you heard or seen anything strange in the area? He asked me. His voice was somehow both high and low, squeaky and deep, like soap in glass and boots in gravel. I didn't know how to respond. All I could say was, no. He did not seem to mind having a shotgun pointed at him. I see, he said, and reached up to touch his hat. As he nodded, as if to leave, he stopped and dipped his head just enough to look over the glasses. Tell me, do you find your current life lacks meaning? I told him the truth. My life is filled with faith and purpose. He nodded and seemed almost grateful. He turned, and in that moment, I noticed that he seemed strange. Like a broken shadow and twisted suspicion forced into a trench coat. Faith in what, I wonder, he said as he walked away. I went back inside, and I began to wonder too. December 25th. The sign is gone. Almost like the man took it away with him, along with the sunlight, and my certainty. Could I have done better? Yes, but what was better? Could the messages have been stronger? Could they have caused more wrath? Did I send them on the wrong days to the wrong targets? Or was this whole thing wrong to begin with? Did I, in my certainty, fail to notice the path I had started down so long ago was the wrong one? I doubt, and I am ashamed. And in that moment of my doubt, I looked up to see at the window those horns, 6 foot tall, curved slightly back and split near the base. 2 sets of antlers, 4 prongs gliding into the evening air from just beyond the glass of my window, and in that moment I knew. It was not the voice of God I had heard, it was the devil. I ran outside to confront him. In this moment I had to know, I had to understand. Was I the instrument of God or the plaything of Satan? And as I ran outside, shotgun in hand, I prepared to confront the devil and to end his time on earth. And where I swore the devil stood, I found a baby deer. Well, it was baby deer sized. It looked like a little white-tailed deer, except atop its head it had impossibly tall horns. They curled out at the bottom, creating a massive hook-like claw on the outside, while the other prongs swept up like the antlers of an antelope, a good 6 feet in length. I have no idea how it had the strength in its neck to move its head. It looked at me, quirked its head, and tilted its massive antlers, and then it opened its mouth and unleashed a mighty howl. It was strange, contorted, like half of the instruments were missing, but it was still enough. Half of the chorus of the heavens is still enough to make a man weep and fall to his knees and cry. And then, much to my fear, I heard the other half of the orchestra. I turned around to find the bear, a massive creature with large front arms and a snarled mouth. Its color was black and trimmed in silver, and its eyes glistened orange. It howled, and I was bombarded from each side with a cacophony that broke way to the voice of heaven itself, Metatron made real. Then the little creature sprung forward, walking around me, tiptoeing on its front hooves with the back legs dangling in the air just above the ground. It then jumped upon the back of the large creature, climbed up its back, and nestled down into a little hollow near the neck. The big creature eyed me and then rose up on its back legs, the horns towering over its already impressive high head, and the two together howled. I fell back onto the ground and cried as I prepared for it to kill me. Then I heard it tromp off into the underbrush. It's dark now. I can hear it out in the woods. It howls for me. It wants me to follow it. Of this I am certain. I will return if it is in God's plan. The sign, the red-eyed bastard, and a mysterious creature. The weirdo trifecta. Townsend, by the way, froze to death that night, more than likely. He died of exposure and was discovered in late February. There were no more bombings, and after the body was discovered, the FBI found this journal and the parts to make dozens of bombs in his little wooden shed in the Mark Twain National Forest. The agents on the scene figured that he was going delusional, that he'd either completely lost his mind, or that he was under the effects of some kind of poisoning, like ergot fungi, that caused his already unsound reasoning to be expanded and manifest hallucinations. Not now. I keep thinking about Beckett. There's something he's not getting. 7 people died because of Martin Townsend. He put 11 people in the hospital. There is a reason we investigate cases like this. Those 3 kids from Missouri are still missing. No matter their crimes, the gang in Los Angeles was brutally murdered. 7 men in Florida are dead, and who or whatever killed them is responsible. Those men deserve some level of justice. The 2 boys in New Jersey, the family and friend groups in Colorado, Bo in Louisiana, all of this, it happened. Whether it was monsters or the mafia or some cryptic conspiracy, those people didn't deserve to die, and if we don't figure this out, more people will die. I can't just let that go. Banshee screams be damned. Lydia thought so too. She thought this guy, the man in the charcoal hat, was connected to each one of these cases. And if he truly is, he's the one thing that might have the information we need to stop these things from happening again. He's either behind it or he's involved in it. This is too developed of a pattern. This is the last file from Lydia's box of The Usual. Case file 149-TX-4648. Date filed, August 29th, 1974. Incident date, August 21st, 1974. Location, Moonlight Drive, near the Texas 35 off-ramp south of Waco, Texas. Witness, Melissa Brighton. Recording agent, Agent Maxwell Bliss, Houston Field Office. Lydia's last note for me, too. The following report was filed 1 week after the incident. Melissa Brighton was a court reporter, and Agent Bliss thought the particulars of the event were so precise due to her 20-year history as a person in a career of precision. It should be noted that Agent Bliss tried to get more investigation into the area following several reports of damaged property. There was serious concern at the time of a foreign incursion following terrorist attacks in Europe and the recent resignation of President Richard Nixon. Bliss was unable to convince higher-ups at Houston this was anything more than the fantasy of a bored woman looking to cause a ruckus and pass some time. Agent Bliss hand-delivered this file to the Bureau headquarters in 1989, along with the rest of the contents of the most recent box I've been going through. These are the dictated notes of Mrs. Brighton. I was driving down Moonlight Drive where my mother lives. I was returning to my home in Waco and normally head north, but it was already well past sunset and I preferred the highway after dark. As I traveled along the road, I noticed the stillness of the night. The moon was recently new and the sliver of light provided very little visibility. As I passed a turnoff by a little creek, I noticed no less than 5 cars parked along the side of a dirt road. There were several men out in the field with flashlights, and they seemed to be searching around the tree line for something. The light from their flashlights illuminated the treetops. I thought it odd, but didn't want to stop in case it was a manhunt or something. I drove on and crossed over the little bridge and up the hill. I crested the hill, and as I turned slightly in a rut on the dirt road, I pumped the brakes hard as I first noticed the tree in the middle of the road. I want to be clear. It was not down in the middle of the road, but a tree trunk standing in the middle of the right lane, as if it had been planted there 40 years ago. I came to a sudden stop, the edge of my bumper tapping the tree trunk. I breathed a sigh of relief and looked forward at the tree. The tree was covered, not in what I first thought was bark, but long, black fur, like the fur of a dog or a bear. Also, the trunk was not one solid shaft, but rather 4 that spread from a broad base together at a point about 7 feet in the air. Only after looking up did I see one of the 4 trunks pull away and realize that A, it was moving, and B, the thing was a lot taller than I realized. 7 feet up must have been the rough equivalent of an ankle. It was still shaped rather like a tree, with the 4 stalks rising to a huge pillowy mass a bit bigger than my car, about 35 feet up. The black fur was dark and coarse, but highlighted by the intense light of the moon as it rose from behind the dense, foliage of the tree. I sat in my car, bathed in moonlight, completely unable to comprehend what I was looking at. A 4-trunked tree that moved in a slow, deliberate loafing. Only then did I realize that there had not been so much moonlight before. The night had been clear and the new moon had only been a few days before, you see. And, well, that full moon I was seeing didn't make sense. And neither did the second one. Only after a moment did I realize that it was not the moon I was looking at, but an enormous glowing eye. 2 of them were mounted on a massive triangular head, like the head of a bat. The head was framed by 2 enormous horns that curled down and in on either side of the head. The creature made no sound, but it looked down at me. And those eyes. I don't know how to describe those enormous eyes. I think I screamed. The head lowered itself, down, down, down. I just sat there, looking at the glowing moon-white eyes the size of hubcaps as they descended over the hood of my car. I don't know when or why I lost consciousness. I came to laying in the back seat of a car that wasn't mine. I heard voices, like people outside of the car. There was a lot of commotion, and I heard the deep voice of a man. I looked out the window and saw a dark-skinned man with a full beard wearing a white coat and a deep red turban. He was talking to a younger man with a rifle about making sure not to overdose something. Then there was a true commotion, the kind where people get really noisy for a second and then you can cut the silence with a knife. I heard a car pull up and 2 doors open and shut. There was an argument between a man whose job it is to open the doors and a man who's too busy to wait for somebody to open a door. The Sikh man, whom I thought for a while was named M. Briety, like his first initial was M, but I came to realize was actually a doctor with the last name Briety, spoke in a deep, focused, rich British accent. "Director, to what do we owe the pleasure?" At first I didn't get to see the man, but his voice was strange, like a man or woman with a high-pitched voice making a conscious effort to sound deeper and more frightening. "Dr. Briety, is the situation under control?" "Yes, Director, I have a flatbed truck here to move the Demwov." "I hope, for your sake, Doctor, that you do, in fact, have it under control. I would hate to have to request a level 4 containment." "That is definitely unnecessary, sir." I heard a crunch, like somebody stomping out a cigarette in the gravel road. I don't think I need to remind you that the case for the Demwov being protected under our original mandate is thin at best. If I have to choose between letting a Demwov expose the project or putting it down, I will not lose any sleep with the latter. "You are a monster. They are harmless." "Tell that to the woman." "It did not mean to hurt her. It was just curious." "It's on display for 10 hours a day, Doctor. It's not the first time it's seen a human." "It doesn't usually get so close to cars." "How did it even escape containment? Don't tell me a keeper left the gate open." At this point, I saw the second man move around the car. He wore a tan trench coat and a dark gray hat, and even in the middle of the night he wore sunglasses. Big ones, like the ones from the drawings of D.B. Cooper. The doctor followed him. The security moat we had around their enclosure wasn't wide enough. It stepped over it. "Stepped over it," the man in the jacket said, turning on his heel and putting a finger in the doctor's face. "Why wasn't there a contingency? I suppose it just stepped over the perimeter wall?" "Yes, Director, that's my suspicion." "I want them leashed until they can go under full avian detainment. Treat the damn things like they can fly." The doctor looked hurt somehow, offended. "You don't talk this way about the other exhibits." "None have escaped containment this often. None have put us at such risk." "The Wendigo has. It's killed people." "The Wendigo is fucking magic, Dalpreet. What do you want me to do with that?" The man in the hat turned and saw me, awake in the back of the car. For a brief moment, I'm sure he saw me, and I'm sure I saw a flash of red from behind the glasses. "She's awake," he said. He walked back to his car. "Handle this, Doctor. You're the best, but you aren't the only one I can get." The doctor opened the car door and spoke to me in a very soothing voice. "Miss, are you all right?" I sat up in the back of the car just in time to see the man in the hat and coat get into the back of a midnight black Packard Super 8 limousine, a driver closing the door behind him. What happened?" I asked. I knew kinda more than I was letting on, and it had been a while since drama club and school, but I remembered a few things. "You nearly hit a cow in the road, miss. I'm with the county and we are trying to contain the animal and return it to the proper pasture." I looked around and saw at least 6 cars, not including my own, the Packard, and a large flatbed that many men were currently gathered around, unfurling white tarps over some large thing the size of a car. "Oh, I see." There were a lot of flashlights, a lot of men running around. "Do you think I'm safe to drive?" I asked. I suddenly wanted to get as far away from there as possible. "Do you?" he asked. I said yes. I got up and he wrote down a phone number to call on a page he tore from a moleskine. As I made my way toward my car, the back window of the Packard rolled down and I heard the man in the hat say something that froze the blood in my veins. "Ms. Brighton." I turned my head to see him, hidden in the shadows of the interior. No space to find any details of his face between the high collar of his jacket and the brim of his hat that wasn't covered by those big glasses. "We'd appreciate it if you kept this little incident to yourself," he said. It's a bit embarrassing, you see. What would people think if we couldn't wrangle this little operation with no more than half the people here? It would be within the best interests of everyone if this was kept quiet. Do you understand? I didn't say anything. He reached up and lowered his glasses a tad, and from over the edge I saw the most horrific thing. Even after coming almost face to face with hubcap-sized eyes on a head the size of my kitchen oven, I've never seen anything like this. His eyes weren't human. They were big, bulging, without eyelashes or eyebrows. They glowed from behind slightly, and tiny flashes of light from whirling flashlights reflected off of them in brilliant hexagons like the sides of a precious gem. They were deep, deep ruby and slick, like covered with a thin veneer of motor oil. This wasn't on the face of some unknown creature descending from the treetops. This was on the face of a man. A man with a slightly silly voice, a man that had chastised someone for acting foolish. And now these strange alien eyes bored into my soul. He repeated himself. It's within the best interests of everyone. Of course, I blurted out and then ran past the car back to my own. I hopped in and noticed that the cars had blocked my way to the highway. I backed down the road for half a mile to the little turnoff I'd seen them at earlier, turned around, and then sped my way back past my mother's house and out into the country before turning back toward Waco. Agent Bliss asked at this point why she had decided to come forward. I saw reports about people's pets missing, about damage to barns and fields, and I just thought, well, the county should have done something about it. And, well, I got to thinking about how none of the vehicles had McLennan County on them. Just that weird symbol. What symbol? It was a butterfly, with big owl-eye spots on the wings. It wasn't like anything I'd seen in the county. End of report. Lydia did some research into this one. Research into the report showed several tire tracks in the area, but any evidence was removed by a week of Texas weather. Dr. Dalpreet Imbriety was an Oxford-trained biochemist who served as a research assistant for Rosalind Franklin at King's College in 1951, assisting her around the time she took the first X-ray diffraction of the double helix, discovering DNA. He graduated with a full doctorate in 1953 and soon became the eminent researcher in the practical uses of DNA manipulation, a field he nearly founded at the Salk Institute in California in 1963 when the facility opened. 5 years later, Dr. Imbriety was involved in a dispute with the board and left the institute. He was reported to have returned to England at that time, but no information was ever found about him practicing or researching in England. He essentially dropped off the grid at that point. There is no evidence to the identity of the director other than mentions in other files I now believe to be related. As for the report about disturbances in and around Waco, Texas, there were reports of nearly a dozen missing pets and a few dead goats and cattle around this time. Locals blame a recent rise in coyote population. However, damaged roofs, fences, and trees had no explanation, as the National Weather Service did not report a tornado in that area. This is the last thing Lydia wrote as an FBI agent.
Zoo is created by C.J. Hausch, Connie Kitts, and Cody Phillips. The voice of McKayla Kespar is Connie Kitts. Original music by Nathan Gandy. Tired of solutions? Become part of the problem by following us on Twitter @ZooPodcast. A special thank you to our patrons, our Spooklight sponsors Yzma Hecht and Lucille Valentine, and our Bigfoot benefactor Paul Matteo. If you have a deep, seething envy of those people, challenge them directly by donating to us at patreon.com/zoopodcast. And you too can hear me read your name after 30 minutes of anxious screaming into the void. Zoo fact. According to our research, the chupacabra and the capybara have a common ancestor, a golf cart-sized Neogene-era carnivore that was both adorable and horrible at the same time. We've yet to name it, so vote to help our scientists name it. Your 3 options are the chupibara, the capacabra, or the nightmare-fueled fur demon.
This actor hole kills fascists.